The Earley Show will begin after a brief word from today's sponsor, Answering Legal. Visit answeringlegal.com to learn more about our 24/7 virtual receptionist team.
I've been utilizing Answering Legal for my firm since 2015, and truth be told, it was a game changer for me. I can be anywhere, and I'm getting my phones answered by Answering Legal. A strategic partner, as I call Answering Legal, provides a great reward. What is that reward? It's time. Time for whatever I want to do. As a private practitioner, I would highly recommend Answering Legal to other private practitioners. Now, every call goes answered.
Sponsored by our friends at Answering Legal. I'm your host, Chris Earley, a personal injury lawyer and business coach in Boston. And we have a real treat today. We have Ryan McKeen from the Connecticut Trial Firm. This is going to be a special episode. Obviously, each episode we bring heavy hitters, but I am really interested and excited to speak with Ryan. He's a good guy. He's running a really special practice. He's an innovator, and I love what he's doing, so I wanted to get him on the show. So, Ryan, thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me, Chris.
All right, as with all of our guests, I encourage the audience, get your pencil sharpened. There's going to be a lot of writer-downers in this episode, as there always are. So I'm sure we'll be talking about things that hopefully will help move the needle in your own practice. So, Ryan, again, thanks for coming on. You're doing things at a level that not many lawyers are right now. And you're not an overnight success, right? This is a long time in the making. You have, you've, like all of us, right? You've got, punched in the face and you kept on going. So I'm really, excited to get into that with you. You and I definitely have things in common. I always try to bring people onto the show who I have things in common with, John Morgan, Jennifer Gore Cuthbert, Ali Awad. These are PI lawyers. They're doing things differently. And in some way, I relate to them, right? And these are the things that I see that we have in common, right? We both grew up middle class, right? No lawyer parents here. We're both fathers. We both are trying to do law differently and innovate. And so I think what I really feel offended to you is the resilience thing, because a lot of people on this call, they get, punched in the mouth and knocked down. They keep going, but I really am excited to hear your story of how you keep going up the hill and flex those, resiliency muscles. So having said that, if you could just tell us a little bit about your upbringing, brothers and sisters, what was it like in the household, growing up? What did that look like?
I was very fortunate. I'm very fortunate. I had an incredibly nice upbringing, incredibly wonderful parents, loving parents who gave me all I needed to succeed in life. Grew up in Enfield, Connecticut. I am the first person in my family to graduate, extended family even, graduate from a 4-year school. My mom went to 2 years of college. My dad served in the Army and then went to do technical work after the Army. I've got a brother who is 2 years younger than me, fabulous brother. Enfield is a suburb of both Hartford and Springfield, here, Massachusetts and Connecticut, and it's a good place to grow up. I mean, it's very middle class. I mean, you had good schools, you had ball fields, soccer fields, that kind of thing. But it's not by any means an affluent town.
Yeah, me too. I grew up in an Irish Catholic, solidly middle class town, right? Cops and firemen, and I kind of like that. There was never, there's always an air of, modesty and family values, and so I can relate to you there for sure. I've heard you talk about your grandfather. Did he own a car dealership? Do I have that right?
He did. He did own a car dealership. He owned Bagetta Honda out in Greenfield, Massachusetts. And this one is fun because my grandfather, he lies about his age to drop out of high school and join World War II. So he told the Navy he was 18 when he was really 16, goes and serves in the Pacific Theater. But that's actually a pretty common thing at that time, where they would lie about their age. Because it's one of those things when you're going through somebody's papers afterwards, you're like, why did the Navy think my grandfather was 2 years older than he was? And then you realize what happened. So I guess that's the kind of guy my grandfather was. I guess that's one of those things. You know, he lied to go fight in the war for this country. Proud, first generation American, Italian American parents, came right off the boat from Italy. Grew up in Springfield, Massachusetts. And then he comes back and, he does a few things really, but he ends up selling used cars, becoming a car salesman, ultimately owning a used car dealership. And he says to my grandmother in it's like 1968, 1970, around that time, he says, I want to borrow $67,000, which there's no way that my grandparents had made $67,000 in their whole entire life. Like if you added up all the days that they went to work. And she thought it was crazy. And then she thought it was especially crazy because he wanted to borrow that money to sell small cars. Because Hondas were very small at a time where things were Oldsmobiles. You think of classic cars from that era. If you're a car head, the Oldsmobiles, the Cadillacs, these boats, right? And then you've got these little Hondas at the time. And what happened is that the gas crisis of the 70s happened, and then people started buying smaller cars. And he was sort of at the right person at the right time and ran a successful car dealership. Very interestingly, in sort of like small world terms that may be relevant to your audience, I posted something online, and Bob Ambrogi reaches out to me, and Bob says, "Ryan, was your grandfather Angelo Bagetta?" And I said, "Yes." And he goes, "My dad worked for him." So super, super small world out there. But I think that in large part, my grandfather is my entrepreneurial inspiration.
Why? Why do you think that is?
I think so much of life is we model other people's behavior, and who were influential people when you were growing up. And this one is fun. I think that the reason for this one is so basic because we would go up to the dealership. It's about an hour away. Like my mom would go up to get the car serviced, right? And I'm 4, 5, 6, 7. My grandfather had the key to the vending machine. Okay. And I thought that was the coolest thing imaginable. I go see my grandfather and he could unlock the vending machine and I could get any candy that I wanted without paying.
Cool.
So it struck me that being an owner of a company was a very cool thing because you had access to keys in the vending machine.
Hey, there's a lot of perks. There's a lot of pain, but there's a lot of perks too. Entrepreneurship.
A lot of perks. And I didn't say, I'm 5, 6 years old. I don't see the pain. I just see the good and plenties. And this, my grandfather had the key. And so that seemed like a great thing to do, to have the key to the vending machine.
That kind of resonated with you, right? And maybe planted a seed for future endeavors. Did you ever paper it by chance or no?
Oh, yeah. Yep, I've worked every day. I'm 43. I've worked every day of my life since I turned 13, delivering papers. So I was a paper boy for 3 years.
So John Morgan's talked about this. He's talked about that on this show. Oprah Winfrey, right? She delivered papers, right? So many people who were successful had paper routes. I don't even know if paper routes are still a thing, at least not on the scale that they used to be. But in the 80s, when I was coming up, I was putting papers together in my living room, hustling, just, delivering newspapers. That's hard work. That requires physical labor, requires coordination, salesmanship. So a lot of those things, can play well as an entrepreneur. It's sort of teaches you certain things. What do you remember about delivering papers?
Yeah, I remembered it was awesome because I get money. I had money to buy the video game that I wanted, or whatever it was, whatever modest hopes that I had at the time. And, I loved it because it got me out. I'd ride my bike. I'd deliver the papers. I got to know the people on the route. I got to know their families. If I treated them well, I got tips. If I was able to, one of the things that, it's very interesting that this business model was allowed to exist as late as it did, because what would actually happen is the paper company would sell me newspapers at 13 years old. So I would then have to buy the 40 newspapers that I would go deliver and then go collect from the customer. So I would get my money back. So it actually required investment. This is when you're 12, 13, right? And I also knew that if I could sometimes they would give like carrier copies to go sell papers because look, I was committing so much time to riding my bike to get to the route, to being out there, to doing these things. So if I could deliver more papers, I could make more money with very not much effort. So it taught me to go try to sell papers to people who were not subscribers, and it also taught me to go collect money because I had to. Not only did they like the paper company never took money from the people that subscribed, they got money from me. I had to go pay my district manager. I had to go get the money from the paper from the customers. So when you're 12 years old and you got to go knock on doors as the bill collector, I think it teaches you something.
100%. So many lessons in there, right? I mean, so many. The way you describe it, it was hard. Like there was a lot of stuff going on for a 12-year-old kid. I mean, like I don't know if I can handle that now. That responsibility.
Well, and look, you and I mean, New England winters are not San Diego either.
Brutal.
Cold, snow, driving rain, dark at 4:00 in the afternoon. I mean, just a whole host of things. Like it is not. If you were out there listening, like it is not delivering papers in San Diego.
No, I wish it was. It's really nice weather. All right, so obviously I look at you, like me, a grinder. You said you're 43. You've always worked. I'm 47. I've always worked. I'm a worker. Yeah, I've heard you talk. At some point, you got influenced by Steve Jobs, right? I think you read or heard something. At what point in your life were you impacted, and how were you impacted by Steve Jobs?
Yeah, it's one of these things where I think in life, like, we get messages, but sometimes it's like we have to be at a place where we're open to the message. And so sometimes, if you're me, you have to read books many times. You have to listen to podcasts a bunch. You have to go and listen to different speakers a bunch. And sometimes it's just like we're not ready for the message, or we have to hear it a few times for it to sink in. Yeah. And so I just read his book, and it was early 2012, the biography. And I really thought, like, man, I'm a lawyer and I'm an associate and I'm grinding. But basically, if I stay on this path, I'm going to basically be right where I am like 10 years from now. And I see a better way. My firm, very old school. I mean, like, they probably still have the same website up now that they had when I left. They are paper files. And so it's 2012, and I'm like, there's a way better way to do this. And I'm like, I need to smash that model for myself. So it's like, we're going to go cloud-based. In 2012, cloud-based software was possible. We're going to be innovative in our marketing. We're going to be innovative in how we serve clients. And basically, we're going to do things differently, because what the message from the Jobs book really to me was that I was playing life too conservatively. I was not living to my full potential. It was comfortable, but it was not what I was put on earth to do.
Yeah, I hope people are writing that down, because, Steve Jobs, a real innovator, a real disruptor. I really feel like, Ryan, the law is like 10 years behind tech. We're 10 years behind everything. And if I'm hearing you accurately, correctly, you like to stay ahead, right? I see your content on LinkedIn, Tiger Tactics, right? The book you co-wrote, right, with other authors. You have to be different. You have to get out of the box. Steve Jobs did that masterfully. And kudos to you for getting out of the legal space, getting your head out of the legal space, and looking at a guy like that who's just doing things on a different level. See, that's smart. And that's what a lot of lawyers, I feel like, need to do, because so many lawyers looking around the room and saying, oh, okay, I'll do it this way, to fit in. I think you gotta be a little bit different, right? Mike Morse, Mike, right? He talks about, being not vanilla, but cherry vanilla, whatever, right? Being different in your flavor, your approach. He's been very successful being different. Steve Jobs is very successful. So, the lawyers on this call, that's when I started to get traction, was when I started to do things differently. When I looked outside the industry. Ben Glass, he's a guy who I took that from, right? Looking outside the industry. So kudos to you for taking that risk. So, all right. So I'm sure, mom, dad, the whole family, ecstatic. Ryan graduates law school. You started working for a small firm, right? And then at some point you went on your own. And then, but I think you partnered up with your partner, right? What year did you form the law firm? Was that 2016?
Yeah, my journey was this. I was reading the book down in Bahamas, and I had a few Goombay smashes, I think it was. And I texted my friend Megan Freed at the time, and I said, "Hey, you want to start a law firm?" Megan, very successful, runs a very successful family practice with her wife Kristen in Hartford. And at the time, she was in-house insurance counsel at one of the big insurance companies in Hartford. So that, probably, I know it felt like a message like out of the blue to her because that was not the career track she envisioned herself on. But she listened and was like, "Yeah, let's do this." So we started Freed McKeen, and we started building up a firm. Um, and we really didn't have. I read about this in Tiger Deck because we really didn't have a set vision for what we wanted to do. We just wanted to be awesome, and being awesome is not a business plan. And so within 6 months or so, we really weren't talking. And within a year, we had split. And I had gone solo. They had now have freed Markcroft. And I was on my own. And then, yeah, in 2016, my now partner, Andrew, and I founded Connecticut Trial Firm. But that was more of we were two different firms under one umbrella. And it wasn't until 2018 that we fully merged our practices.
So I'm really fascinated because this resonates with me and this resonates with practically everybody listening to this call. There was one point in time you've talked about sitting across the table from your wife, credit cards are getting declined, right? There's hardship, right? It's hard. What year was that? Because I feel like that really was big in your life, and I can relate to that big time.
That was I think off the top of my head that was 2017. Or 2016. It was right around then. And I went on a walk and I was listening to a podcast. I so wish I could remember what episode or what show, but I guess it doesn't matter. And the person said, look, if you are out there and you're trying to build a business in legal, I mean, they're basically describing my problem, which is that I was working my face off. I was doing the jobs of 10 different people. I was basically my bookkeeper, my janitor, my web guy, my intake, my marketing, and I was also delivering. I was also the lawyer, right? So that is a lot of jobs to be doing. And when you're doing a lot of those jobs, what you're doing is you're working really hard, but you're not able to make the money you need to make because you're not able to effectively delegate things that should be delegated. And so the person, and it feels like everybody's mad at you all the time. You're always behind on things. And it's just really generally unpleasant. And so I went for the walk and I'm just like, I can make okay money at this, but not really great money. And I'm like, this is just not sustainable for me. So I need to drastically change what I'm doing, or I need to go get out, right? Like I could go to work for an insurance company and probably make more money and have less stress with all of this. And why am I sort of, I'm on my own, I'm working for myself, but really I wasn't. I was serving about 1,000 different masters at the time. And so this person said, look, if you're ever to change your life and your business, you have to be able to leverage the time and talent of others. And I was like, oh, yeah, that's the thing. Because to that point, I had been out on my own for about 6 years in various forms with Megan or solo or, expense sharing with Andrew at the time. And the only person I had ever really hired, aside from some law clerks on like sort of one-off assignments, was a part-time paralegal for 9 hours a week. And I realized that if I was going to have a business and if I was going to work in a way that was productive and ultimately make more money, that I needed to hire people.
So so financially, I think I heard at some point you said on I might have did a different podcast or some book, I don't know, but you had a couple of good PI hits, made some money, but you were, doing kind of like a lot of different things. But those PI hits must have been helpful. Let me ask you this, because I'm fascinated by this, because there's a certain point where people they have a choice to make. They can quit. I mean, I guess quit would have been to go for insurance defense firm, right? Quit your dream, your journey. How close were you to doing that, to actually like making that happen.
I don't think I was close at all. But it just it's useful sometimes to play with things and to imagine different realities, to really embrace the one that you are with, or to understand why the position is that matters. Like, I would never want to go to work for the government or go to work for an insurance company or do hourly defense work or a whole host of things. So I think for me the question was more, how could I do this better, period? Because it is the thing that I wanted to do, if that makes any sense.
It does make sense. So you had, if I'm hearing you correctly, you had kind of an epiphany. You had an aha moment, right? You needed to leverage other people. When you and I had lunch in Worcester a few months back, you talked about, and I've shared this sentiment with other lawyers, you need to buy back your time. So it sounds like, and this isn't like 20 years ago. This is like 6 years ago. You had this transition, this transformation of understanding the leverage that you lacked by doing everything yourself, right? So once you started to delegate, I bet things started to, you were still struggling. There was hard times. It was difficult because you were in the weeds, getting a firm off the ground, doing things at a high level, right? Because you had big dreams, big vision. But when I'm telling you, everyone on this call, you got to delegate stuff. Hate to bring again John Morgan, right? He talks about ruthless delegation. The guy's so right. He and I talked about that. You have to delegate ruthlessly. Whatever is on your desk today, get it off your desk. You have to delegate. All right. So it sounds like you started to really embrace that mindset. But something that really intrigues me is the resilience muscle you've talked about before, right?
Let me just drop something that may, I'm going to go into the resilience model. Let me just drop something, because one of the things I had to figure out, and I did figure out through therapy and different things, and we talked about like my grandfather being an example, but
Mm-hmm.
you have to understand, if you're going to be an entrepreneur, like, who are your examples in life, period. And it's often going to be your parents. Like, it's not a very big thing, because it's where are those primal imprints made on your attitude surrounding work and money. And so I grew up middle class. Like, my parents didn't hire a landscaper. Like, there was no housekeeper. If the electrical wasn't working, like, my dad would like wire it. Okay. Like, this is just the way you grew up. Like, you didn't hire help ever, basically, unless my dad would paint the whole house. Like, I mean, it was just, you never hired help. And so
Right.
that's what I grew up with. And the notion was always like, if you spent $1, like, that was $1 less that you had. Okay. And so, like, those were the sort of core beliefs that were actually holding me back in business. Like, they served me growing up middle class. They served my family very well. My family is fine. But they don't serve me in running a business. So what I was trying to do was run a complicated business, even us being just a solo lawyer, with basically like a 5-year-old mindset, or a 7-year-old,
Mm-hmm.
or a 10-year-old mindset. So I think, what you have to do is, and I'm going to lead into the resilience muscle here, is what you have to do is you have to understand that, those things that hurt do instruct. And the only way you can lose in this game is by not learning. And so you're like, hey, I'm in a lot of pain. My wife is crying. I'm going to use this as an opportunity to reevaluate and reconceptualize and go to the drawing board, find inspiration, and push through. And I'm going to let this secret out for anybody, whether you're John Morgan or anybody else out there listening. Like, none of this stuff is rocket science. None of what we are doing is putting a person on Mars or curing cancer or anything like that. It's all pretty much like, if you can execute on the fundamentals, like, you're going to kick a lot of ass out there.
Yeah.
Like, if you don't believe that you can do it, like, you have some work to do on yourself, like, in between your ears. And if you believe you can do it, well, then you just have to accept that you're going to push through pain.
You must, right? And there's that, the paperboy stuff, the adversity. Right now, we pay someone to cut our grass. We pay someone, right? I used to be shoveling driveways. A lot of people, they've heard my story. I grew up in trauma around addiction, homelessness, right? So I'm super, like, humbled. And so I feel like you're humbled too. Like, you are not a flashy guy. You're not flaunting stuff. you're sober, you're modest, right? However, you have big dreams and you're getting after it. I really appreciate that. So I really hear you when you say like the 5-year-old self, like we saw things, we heard things when we were 5 years old. Some things were good, some things were not good. But I think the key is to like evolve and keep growing. But it sounds like you had a mindset shift, the whole delegation thing, because that really seemed to open up the floodgates for you, if I'm hearing you right? That mindset shift, right? I think lawyers have a scarcity mindset. And I think abundance is a real thing. There's no way you've gotten to this point without an abundance mindset. There's no way you've gotten to this point without giving, being a giver, right? So many lawyers can be selfish, all about them. Isolated. You got to give. Ryan asked him to get on this podcast. He jumped at it, right? He's a giver. He's always giving. Really successful people give. So I encourage anyone in this audience, don't be a taker. Give to people. So I'm interested. So you start the practice, right? You guys are growing it. You're going through tough times. But I feel like me, you're a culture fanatic. Like you really care about your firm culture, right? What did you have that in mind when you were growing this thing, the culture that you wanted? Or was that like an evolving thing that took shape over time?
No, I absolutely had it in mind as to what it is that I wanted to create it. Because what I wanted to do is I worked at a firm that worked. I mean, look, I've been in business like 70 years and everything, but I knew it could be better. And so I took a lot of what they did wrong and just did the opposite, honestly. And so what I wanted to do was build a firm that I would want to work for and build a firm that I'd want my kids to work for. And so I thought a lot about what that is, what it looks like, what that means practically, and then sought to build it, communicate that vision to others, and then hire people who are attracted to the same vision. So that's been intentional. Look, I really think that all companies, and this is not me, this is not an original thought, but I think that all companies are shadows of their founders.
Totally.
And so if you are a hot-tempered mess, like your company's going to be a hot-tempered mess if you are founding it. And so I think a lot of my firm is in some, an extension of both me and my partner, Andrew, in similar and different ways. But, I think both of us see it the same way as to we want to build a healthy law firm.
Personally, I feel like I only got the culture thing like probably 3 or 4 years ago, right? I was late to the game, but that's one of my biggest challenges is the culture thing. Ryan, I make good culture decisions. I make terrible culture decisions. It's so hard. The financial aspect is one thing, but this is more vague culture, right? Core values, but it's like, it's just not tangible and it's so tricky. But each day I would encourage everyone on this call, get better and better. Improve your culture. Jennifer Gore Cuthbert, she was on, I think, 2 episodes ago. She said something that really stuck out in me. She said, and this relates to what you just talked about, the mindset of the owner trickles down. Like you said, right? The attitude, the mindset. And furthermore, the growth mindset or scarcity mindset of the owner trickles down to the staff. So everyone on this call, you got to be careful what thoughts you're feeding into in your head, because your staff, they're going to know when you're having a bad day, when you're pissed and stressed. And I've done that, right? I've been stressed and I know it comes out. I'm not hiding it. You think you're hiding it from your staff. You're not. Be careful how you walk in to your office. And also be careful how you walk in at the front door when you get home, because you got to leave that stuff at work. And when you're at work, you got to be strong.
Here's what I think about culture. Like, I don't think culture is soft at all. My definition of culture is what the firm does. Like, it is day to day, the actions of the organization. That is it. Like, it's not soft. It is a very definitive thing that is almost like if I could tell a firm's culture if I looked at their calendars. Like, if you gave me broad access to their calendars, I would have a very good idea as to what the culture of the place is. And so if you're talking about things like, we're going to have transparency and we're going to provide a supportive environment that has feedback, like, you have to have those, talent assessment reviews, those discussions every quarter. Are you going to say that leadership of the firm matters? Well, are you having your leadership meetings? Are you doing quarterly planning? Are you, I'm going to get off a call right now. I get off a call with you, Chris, and then I've got a call with Stephanie Everett because one of the things that we're doing right now is we are training other leaders in the firm to run on EOS. The leadership team runs on EOS, but guess what? Our intake team's going to run on EOS. Our MedMal pod's going to run on EOS, and teaching them, and so it is what you do is the culture. And yes, I mean your attitude towards things as a leader. I mean, look, if you're not if you're leading an organization of any sort of size, everybody is looking to you for cues. They are reading you. And so your attitude, if you are a leader, or your mindset or your mood, absolutely trickles down to everybody else. So yeah, if you're not there, like you're not capable that day, like don't come into the office, go for a walk, go fishing, do whatever you want to do, read a book, watch, play Nintendo. I don't care, but just don't come in and spread that fear, that anxiety, that anger, that frustration. Because, if you say that you are frustrated with a client, it gives your team carte blanche to say this client is terrible and not serve them. And that's how you end up with problems.
I love this conversation, man. I talk to a lot of successful people, but this is a really good call. What you said about, just in terms of culture, right? Talking the walk, walking the walk. But one thing in particular you said is that a firm that you would want to work for yourself? And I've never looked at it like that. I'm always like, I want good culture. I want good culture, right? And I'll walk the walk. But is this a firm that I would want to work at? Now that's a game changer for me. I think everyone should consider that, entertain that, be honest about it, right? Be real in your answer. I think it's a good litmus test for how you can do perhaps better with your culture. I feel like, Ryan, it's never done, right? Like every day of the week, you're growing that culture. It's a precious baby. You're rocking the baby, right? You're not like slapping the baby and being rough. You're like rocking the baby, right? It's so precious.
Yeah, and here's the thing: like you have a culture, whether you're intentional about it or not. Yeah. So, and it's not necessarily like, hey, we have Friday ice cream trucks or something like that. Like, okay, that's part of a thing, but it is not the thing. And I feel like what happens in this business, or maybe it happens in every business, but I don't know other businesses, is that when firms are thinking about this, they look for like cheap solutions. And the cheap solution is we're a shitty place to work, but man, we have Taco Tuesday. Like it's low rent. It's like a low rent solution where the real meaningful thing to do, and you see this where people who aren't building brand and they're not building web presence, they fall for gimmicky marketing, right? Because they just need clients. They don't sustain, they do random acts of marketing. But really, like the culture is like, are you talking to your people? Are your people communicating openly? Is there an environment of trust? And yeah, like Taco Tuesday is awesome. Tacos are awesome. I don't hate tacos at all. We have had taco trucks, but don't mistake that for culture.
Well, you talked a little while ago about the fundamentals, right? This isn't rocket science. At the end of the day, let's not complicate the culture, right? Just basic building blocks, right? I think about here in New England, the Patriots, just, fundamental, boring, structured success, right? It's just like doing the little things, do your job, right? I think a leader's job is like, you have to make other people better, do these things each day, make yourself better, level up. I know, you're a reader, I'm a reader. You're always, I just feel like a lot of law firm owners stay in front of the computer monitor too much. Nothing good happens behind that. But I like the emphasis on the fundamentals. It's not rocket science. It's not complicated. A little bit each day that you're doing, you're going to crush the competition. So this is more like a philosophical thing, but as I study successful people, I feel like the most successful, they don't chase money. It's not about money. It's about like doing what they're passionate about. You have energy. I have energy. I feel like you and I are energized by this stuff of the culture building, the HR challenges, right? The visionary EOS challenge that you have. How does that play out for you in terms of, leaning into your passion? Do you derive daily energy from this? What do you find?
Yeah. One of the things that I think is very useful is like, look, if you're going to grow, you have to Like we use Jay Henderson to do all of our employee testing to just
I love
basically get some
Jay.
idea
Always
that
use
there's a fit. Well, one of the things I did is I turned Jay Henderson loose on me. Okay. And Jay does some basic entry level screening for hires, but he can also do some really sort of in depth, borderline, like neuropsychological stuff as to how it is you operate. And it's painful. It is painful. It is not all pretty if you are actually doing this. Okay. So if you're out there and you're not in a state where you can hear this stuff, like, don't do it. But it is, to me, it was essential work to understand, yeah, what motivates me, what doesn't motivate me, what do I check. And money is not one of my motivators, like, at all. And like, that is completely fine. I've got friends like Marco Brown. Money is an intense motivator of his. Okay. The important thing is not what motivates you or doesn't motivate you. It is, especially related to money, but it is, are you, what you need to understand what gets you out of bed and where your fuel comes from for your day and your energy. So I think that there needs to be a level of self-awareness. The sooner you can obtain that, the better. But yeah, I'm not driven by money. I am driven by impact. I am driven by status. I am driven by community. All of those things are not money.
I like the word impact. Because what good is it if you're not impacting, if you're not denting the world, right? You just mentioned Jay Henderson. Before we got on this call, Ryan, I was talking to my administrator about 3 potential hires, attorney hires. And I said, who do you like? She said, well, I don't know. I'm not really sure. I said, run him through Jay Henderson's test. So, if you're on this call and you're not using Jay Henderson, he's a good guy. He's a friend of mine. He can be trusted. And Ryan, I did that on myself. I took his test and I saw the results like, oh man. I was like, whoa.
Well, and go ask Jay for, he can go deeper. The one you do for your hiring is superficial. There's some deep stuff out there where you're like, oh boy.
Jay's really good.
Because his test, he can run it through like 1,000 different filters. And so there are other higher level filters out there that you don't need to run somebody on your intake team through.
Switching gears, when did you start with EOS, by the way?
Really started with EOS in like 2017.
Okay.
We EOS has been incredibly powerful. Lee Rosen sent me the book when I was doing the Rosen Institute, and I ran with it, ate it up. One of the key things that Andrew and I did in March 2017, is we did the Vision Traction Organizer, VTO. You can find it on EOS.com. Gino Wickman talks about it in the first chapter of EOS, downloadable for free. I'm not an EOS implementer. None of that was a plug, but just telling you what we did. So we did the EOS worksheet for Vision Traction, and we set our big, hairy, audacious goal, which is in traction speak, like, where do you want to be in 10 years, of having a $10 million jury verdict. Why did we set that? We set that because we wanted to be the best trial firm in Connecticut, and we looked around and we're like, well, that's not, the goal needs to be measurable and whatnot. Either you make it or not, and best is not that. So we said, if we get a $10 million jury verdict, that is something that puts us in the conversation, like, undeniably, looking at the top level peers, looking at their websites. So we did that. And then we didn't have a case at that point, really probably worth $100,000 at all. But we had this audacious goal that we wanted to be this kick-ass trial firm. And then in March or September of that year, so 6 months later, we meet Mikey Cruz. And Mikey Cruz is ultimately the case that brings us a $100 million verdict. So what we did is we ended up 10xing our vision in half the time. And I think that we would never have got there without doing the vision work and without committing to that vision.
So I feel like, and I want to get into that trial and outcome, but I'm really interested in the attraction thing. Do you meditate or no?
Yes, I do sometimes. I go through phases where I meditate frequently, and now my life is a little disruptive, and I don't have the space at the moment. Sure. But yes, you could say for the past 10 years, I have done a significant amount of meditation.
Well, I think meditation is fantastic. So, I think about attraction, right? So about a month ago, we decided, you know what? No more smaller cases. We're only in this for bigger cases. What happened? Bigger cases started coming our way. Phones ringing. With you really get what you attract. And I know it may sound hooey to some lawyers on the call, but stuff is legit. You are a magnet for what you think about, right? Something I started to do recently, Ryan. Each night before bed, I write down 3 things I'm grateful for, right? And to me, that's important. I journal in the morning. You got to work in your head. So many lawyers, and you know this, right, from your experience of seeing other lawyers. I see other lawyers too. They're not well in their between their ears, right? It's unfair to their families, unfair to their staff, unfair to themselves. You need to work. You got to be. I'm really into self care. You got to take care of yourself. And this profession will burn you out. If you expect to do things at a high level like Ryan, you have to take care of yourself. You can't disregard your body, your mind, your emotions. Be kind to yourself. Be compassionate. I think that's really important. All right. So you got the that Mikey Cruz case, right? And you got it faster than you expected, and it's on a different scale than what you're even after, right? You've talked about this before. This is more of a financial thing. I know you've talked about advocate capital as helping, right? Because you can't self-fund. I've been doing that for many years. Self-funding cases, these are basically interest-free loans that you're advancing in these cases. We're in the process of working with advocate capital to start working with them. I would encourage everyone on the call, you shouldn't be funding your own cases, because I feel like that gave you the bandwidth to go to town, to get the experts, to work it up without limitation, right? But anyway, so you got that case. What happened then? Were you just all focused on that case, or how did you balance the scale of that case with your other matters at the time?
Yeah, what we had to do was, look, we had to build a business to support that case, because we made a commitment to Mikey Cruz in that hospital room that we would do everything and for him that any firm could possibly do. And that meant committing, everything. There was nothing that wouldn't have been on the table to get Mikey Cruz the life he needed at the time. We owed it to him. We owed it to his family. And it's a promise that we kept to him. So we had to figure out a way to do that. And part of it was we had to hire people. So that's when we hired our first time lit paralegal. We hired somebody to be reception intake at that time as well for us. We hired essentially an office admin to run finances and do those kinds of things. We brought aboard advocate capital. We really started investing in building out our file vine at that point, improving the way we operated, because look, Mikey Cruz was paralyzed 6 years ago in September, and Phillips, the mainly responsible defendant, the defendant the jury found over 90% responsible, has paid exactly $0 on this. They have not paid. So you can go broke trying to get a case like Mikey Cruz over the finish line, because they will fight you tooth and nail. They will delay. They will deny. We ended up having to spend, I think it was $370,000 into experts onto that case, or litigation costs. At the same time, we had to make payroll. In order to make payroll, we had to take in work and resolve other matters. So what we tried to do was create space for Andrew in particular to take the lead on Mikey Cruz, so he could work that case, because we knew it was critically important to the firm and to Mikey. And so that involved me doing more things like pre-litigation, some litigation, some intake, some marketing, probably wearing way too many hats for way too long. But we needed to do it to get the money to stay alive, to stay in the game, to keep fighting for Mikey.
So you go through years of litigation, you get this, monster verdict. I feel like you're the kind of guy that is the same guy you were, an hour before the verdict. Like, you haven't changed. I'm interested to hear how opportunities have changed. Did you just become like a magnet? Everyone wants a piece of you. How did your life change after the verdict?
It's a great question. It was one of these moments where I was sitting at counsel table, and it was fantastic because they asked for the jury to be, they asked for a jury polled. the jury to be polled, which in Connecticut just means that the judge has to read the verdict over and over and over and ask each juror individually if this is in fact their verdict, which I guess maybe one time in 1876, a 4-person filled out a form that was wrong, and this is now the process or something. But it's really nonsense, because every single time the verdict is the verdict, right? And so they had to keep reading this $100 million verdict 8 different times, or 6 different times. It doesn't even matter. It was a bunch of times. And, I'm sitting there and I'm sobbing like tears of relief. And because I feel like it was relief because we made a commitment to Mikey, and, 5-6 years of hell for him and fighting. And also I'm sitting there and I'm like, this is like one of the 3 big moments in my life, like birth of my kids, marriage to my wife, and this verdict. Because it's at any of those moments in your life that your life before and after gets divided into two different things. We were well aware that this was like 3 times the highest verdict in the state of Connecticut. We had done a lot of verdict research to figure out, prior to closing, we knew where this stood. We knew the significance of it. And I'm going to say this too. One of the things that I knew, we did a lot of focus groups, a lot. I think maybe we did 14 of them over the course of the trial, over the course of the representation, maybe 12. I don't know, Andrew can tell you. But what we did, I knew, and I have text to prove this, and maybe I'll show it at the $100 million day, that we were going to get a verdict of $100 million. I texted this to people during trial. How's it going? We're going to hit him for 100 mil. Sometimes I would hedge it and say 50 to 100 mil, but I knew where we were going with this. And so what I started doing, working with our marketing director, Brittany, in January of that year, is we started building a campaign called Connecticut Trial Firm Wins, or CTF Wins. And so we bought ctfwins.com. We bought 888 CTF Wins. We started posting on social media, Connecticut Trial Firm Wins, because I sort of believed that was going to be like the capstone win, for us. And yeah, I mean, things changed. That put us on the map. I mean, that served notice to our colleagues. That served notice to a lot of people. In many ways, I just felt like it was proof of concept or validation of what we had been doing, but it was certainly inarguable. It was definitive. It was not something that was an award given to us. It was something that we had done that nobody else had done in Connecticut. I would say that a lot of my work thereafter, I was at my desk at 8:30 the next morning after the verdict. There's things to do. There's lots of things to do. But one of the biggest things that I sat down with Andrew and I said, right now we have this moment and it needs to be all gas and no brake, because we have this tremendous wind in our sails. And what are we going to do with it? Maybe we just get paid out and we retire. I don't know. But you have to be intentional about what you want to do. And it was no, we want to build this into something way better. We wanted, before the verdict, I would tell our team, I'm like, Mikey Cruz is not the end of something. It's the start of something. This case is the start of something. And I felt an intense, being aware of the moment, I felt an intense obligation almost to seize that moment and to do the things that I knew that were going to transform the firm, transform the futures of our team, transform our clients, and try to transform the profession at the same time. And I wasn't going to throw away my shot.
So you had to talk about resilience again, right? Before the verdict, you had to there were offers, right? You had to turn down offers. You had to have the stomach to turn it down when a lot of lawyers would take it.
With Phillips, no, these guys are jackals, and they only ever offered him $1.5 million. And so we had no pressure on our side. We were never going to take $1.5 million. Even post verdict, they their offers are a joke. A joke. And so even now, as we're up on appeal, we're just like, we have nothing to lose. Like, go ahead. I don't care. $1.5 million was never getting it done for Mikey for Phillips. Honestly, we drew a line in the sand and we told them, you tell us your insurance policy is $20 million. You want out of this, you're paying us $20 million, or you're going to have to get a lesser number from a jury. And we were very clear on that.
I love how you say it was like about validation, right? Because as you know, all of us on this call, we're growing law firms, mostly personal injury law firms, and we always have doubts. Am I doing the right thing? Did I make the right hire? Did I screw that up, right? But when you have a crowning moment like that, that's the ultimate validation that, hell yeah, this is,
Yeah.
I always knew it would work, and it just worked, and I told you so. And that's just like, that's so awesome, man, because there were a lot of sleepless nights. I know man, like just the stress, the toll that this profession having you. To get that validation, that's crazy. But it happened so bigger and what happened faster than you thought. Let me ask you this. Where do you want to see the firm in, say, 5 or 10 years? Like, what's the next chapter?
That's easy. What we did is we had to go back and as a visionary, had to go back and do a bunch of vision work. So I spent the first quarter of last year talking to my team, thinking about vision. I interviewed every single person on my team for about an hour and just thought and talked and say, what do we want? Where do we want to go? And ultimately, I took those ideas. I took them back to our leadership team, and we wrote down a very bold vision for the future. And so as much as Andrew and I said we wanted to be the top trial firm in Connecticut when we were in 2017, what we said is we want to be the top trial law firm in the United States. Like, that is our big, hairy, audacious vision. But of course, like, retraction, that is not something that can be obtained or not obtained, right? So what we said is we want 100 settlements verdicts exceeding $1 million within the next 10 years. So we want to get full justice on the cases that we have. We want 10 verdicts or settlements above 8 figures. We want to handle increasingly complicated and high profile cases. We want to train 1,000 lawyers inside and outside our firm within 10 years. We believe that great lawyers teach. And that is where the $100 million day came, because we were like, okay, we need to train 100 lawyers a year. And so we're going to cap our $100 million day at 100 people. And that's what we're going to do. We want to teach. We want great firms teach. We want to be a great firm. We're going to teach. We want to give back $1 million in time and charity, or in time and or money to charitable causes. We are a community-based firm. We want to earn 10 prestigious Great Places to Work awards. We're recognized by the Hartford Business Journal as the 3rd best place to work in Connecticut. We said, that's awesome. We got some work to do. Let's come back in 2023 and be the best place. Talk to our team. So that's one of the things, because we know we can't achieve the other things without being a great place to work. So we set that huge, audacious vision for the firm, and we're laser focused on executing on it.
I mean, I think the best place to work thing is like the coolest. I mean, how proud would your grandfather be, right? I mean, it's really cool, man.
I think my grandfather had very different attitudes towards employees than I do. So there's no question he would be proud of what his grandson has accomplished. There's no question he's looking down on it, but he'd be like, really, Ryan? Really?
That's awesome.
I don't think I would want to have worked for my grandfather. I can say that.
Maybe he wouldn't have wanted to work for himself either. I don't know. All right, I want to kind of wrap up. I want to ask you a few kind of quick questions. As you're at this stage of your growth, what's your biggest challenge today?
I think the biggest challenge is what it always is, which is like myself, which is, look, as you get bigger, like in some ways it gets easier. Like you're able to attract more talent. You have more money to throw at problems. Money does solve a lot of problems in business. And you're able to just do things that are pretty cool. But I think for me, it's like where like, how long do I want to keep grinding? Where are my impediments as a leader that I'm some way holding back this organization? How do I, now that I'm fully in, for the first time, I'm out of all client work, I'm purely in the visionary seat. In fact, I have a full bucket chief operating officer. So I'm not even the one running this business anymore. How do I be the best CEO? Like, what are the skills that I need for that? So I really think that, yeah, the biggest amount of work is just up here, as usual. I pointed at my head for those in your car.
What book has had the most profound impact on you in your life?
Traction.
Love that book.
Traction.
Me too. That and the E-Myth are my favorite business books.
Yep.
Anything in particular that keeps you up at night as it relates to the business?
No, nothing business related keeps me up at all. I sleep well.
That's good.
No, I mean, I think the only thing that keeps me up in general is just, the health and well-being and safety of those I love and care about.
All right. Obviously, yes. Obviously, we have this. You had this massive verdict. Even before that, what do you think your biggest competitive advantage was and is? Obviously, the verdict's there, but what's your, why are you at this point? Like, what do you think your advantage was that maybe other lawyers weren't, mindful about themselves personally?
One of the things that I did test with Jay Henderson is I test as a visionary. I test as somebody who actually sees the future. And that may sound incredibly pretentious, and perhaps it is, but I think a lot of lawyers live in the present. Some of them live in the past, and that's a different thing. So I was explaining to our chief operating officer, who comes to us from the business world and not a legal world, and he basically has two firms that he has any idea how they operate, and it's me and Mike Morris. And so if your examples are what we do and what John Nakazel does, your sort of worldview skews. And I was like, look, most lawyers, they live in the present. They say, I've got to make payroll this week. How am I going to get the $10,000 that I need to make payroll? Oh, somebody came in. They're going to offer me $3,000 to do an eviction. Okay, now I've got to get $7,000. Oh, my wife, my kid needs braces. How am I going to do this? And so they're really operating in a reactive present. I operate my space within the legal community firm is really operating into the future. And I spend a lot of time thinking about what will be and how to get us there.
I love that so much, man. We talk about Steve Jobs, right? He wasn't talking about today or yesterday. He's talking about tomorrow. That's what you need to do. Hey, man, this has been such an amazing call. I love what you're doing. A lot of respect for the unique firm you've built, that you are building. Ryan, Ryan's on LinkedIn. I see him posting all the time. He's an easy guy to locate. Reach out to him. Obviously, as you can tell from the show, he's a candid, transparent, accessible guy. And I love what you're doing. So thank you so much for being on the show, man.
Chris, thank you. Always a pleasure. Look forward to seeing you in Boston, and hope we can grab lunch again sometime soon. If you're out there and you're looking to be coached, or you're thinking about it, definitely check Chris out. He's a real deal, very authentic guy, and you're going to get a lot of value, no question.
You're awesome. Thank you so much. All right, well, that's it for this episode of The Earley Show. Be sure to check out more episodes of our show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, the Answering Legal YouTube channel.